Hey y'all, my name is Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today, and for this video I am doing my December wrap-up. Can you believe it is already 2021? How weird is that? Bye-bye 2020. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Although it seemed like December literally ran nonstop, somehow I still managed to read 14 books this month, and I'm pretty proud of myself for that. Across those 14 books, I read 3,992 words. My average rating was about 3.8 stars, so not too bad. I think that was around what my overall year rating was, so pretty good. And my genre breakdown was 3 romances, 1 historical fiction, 1 mystery, and 9 fantasy. Still, cannot believe I read so much fantasy. Before we get into all of my reviews, I do just want to say that 7 of those books were me reading The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. I did 2 specific reading vlogs covering all of these books, and in my second one I actually did a full ranking of all of the books, so I'm going to put a link to that in the cards right here. Go check that out. What with that, I don't really think I need to do a whole nother set of reviews on all of these because that's a lot. Next, I also read The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzi. This was the Buy Book Club's read for the month, and while yes, I will eventually do a full review, for the time being, you guys are not going to hear it here. Alright, so that is 8 books down, leaving me with 6 books to review still. Starting at the top, as a part of the Disney Channel Games Readathon, I read The Battle of the Labyrinth by Riordan. This is the 4th book in the Percy Jackson series. My lord, I loved this one. Honestly, I think this might have been my favorite. This was such a fun adventure story overall. There were so many new monsters and myths to dive in, including the Minotaur and Daedalus. Plus, I just really enjoyed having the entire gang together, having Percy, Annabeth, Grover, and Tyson all working as one to try and get through this labyrinth. So much fun. All of my favorite characters. The Persepeth feels were just shining through in this entire story. Oh my gosh, like my shipping heart was just soaring. Also, I absolutely loved the weird friendship, but like they don't really like each other situation between Tyson and Grover. Don't know why, but that was hilarious. Plus Nico, baby Nico, who is becoming like this, you know, dark, edgy little like teenager, and just so cute. I can't wait to read more with Nico in the Heroes of Olympus series. Unsurprisingly, I gave this one 5 stars. It was such a fun ride. Next, for that same readathon, I also read Take a Hint, Dani Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is the 2nd book in the Brown Sisters companion series. Just like Chloe Brown, this relationship was just phenomenally written, with characters who had so much depth and were so interesting. I loved getting to learn about Saphir, the main love interest in this, and his nonprofit, how he tries to push against toxic masculinity, his issues with his own anxiety and PTSD, but at the same time he's such a sweetheart and a romantic, and he cares so deeply about the people around him. Dani could get a bit aggravating for me at times, but I will say I loved her confidence. She was super sassy and snarky when she needed to be, but as much as I appreciated their relationship in this, I do think this story taught me that I don't really like the fake dating trope, because I got really tired of the whole thought process. Oh, they're just acting that way because that's how couples are supposed to act, and we're a couple, right? They don't actually think that about me. I think that did detract from my enjoyment a bit. While I still really enjoyed this book, I just didn't quite love it as much as Chloe Brown, so I still did give this one 4 stars, but as I said, I think I just realized this trope might not be for me. Next, naturally, I had to finish out the Percy Jackson series with the last Olympian, and honestly, such a great ending to this series. It was fast-paced, it got my heart racing, I was so nervous that something terrible was going to happen to one of these characters that I loved so much. And although there's tons of action happening, it is also just so interesting to look at the characters in this book and compare them to where we started at in the first book. I think that really showcased Rick Riordan's just ability to write the growth of these kids. Plus, like, just again, have I mentioned how much I love Persepeth? Because I do. A lot. For that readathon as well, I read Disappearing Earth by Julia Phillips. This was also a book club read for my Facebook book club, and although I would not usually have ever picked this up, I'm so glad I did because I really enjoyed this. Although I will say it's labeled as a mystery, I don't think you should go into it with that mindset, because if you did, you would be expecting a certain setup in which you are trying to, oh my god, I just realized I haven't done summaries for any of these books. Sorry, y'all. I'll do a summary for this one. Disappearing Earth is an odd story in which every single chapter is following a different woman who lives on the Kamchatka Peninsula in Russia. And in the beginning of the story, we see these two little girls get kidnapped. And then every chapter following that is a different woman who is somehow impacted or connected to the disappearance of those two girls. As I was saying, don't go into this thinking it's a mystery, because you really aren't going to be following these two girls and trying to solve what happened to them. It is much more looking at the women in this society and how their lives are, how they are similar, how they are different, how they react to this crime. Overall, my biggest point I just want to say is Phillips did an amazing job in really characterizing each of these women in different ways that showcases their age, their point in life, their experiences, and what differentiates them from the previous. Although some of them will be connected, it isn't automatically showcased to us until maybe halfway into the chapter, and then that'll kind of add some additional background to why they might be the way they are. All of them were showcased in a way that they could be actual people with real passions, with real flaws, and you truly did come to care about them, even though you would only focus on them for a chapter. It was so interesting to see this. This was really unlike anything I've ever read before, but I loved this book. In the end, I had to give this one 5 stars. It was such a good book, and I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye out to see if Julia Phillips comes out with anything else. Next up, I read Holidaze by Christina Lauren, and this was the group read for the DCG Readathon. On top of that, it was also just a book club read for 2 of my separate book clubs. This story is a Christmas rom-com following May, who usually spends Christmas with her family and friends at this cabin, but in this past year, something awkward happened between her and a friend. On top of that, she finds out that the owners of the cabin are actually going to be selling it. But she ends up making a deal with the universe and ends up back at the beginning when they are first arriving at the cabin. She then proceeds to accidentally restart that day anytime she gets knocked on the head. It's something to do with either the cabin or the possibility that she might end up with Andrew, one of her family friends who she's had a crush on since she was like 13. This was my first Christina Lauren, and while it wasn't my favorite romance I picked up this year, it was still enjoyable. It felt like a Hallmark movie. I loved the time loop aspect in this, just like I do in most movies that have that situation, but I think it kind of was underutilized here. We only really saw a reset maybe 4 or 5 times. I will say the main couple were pretty cute. I really enjoyed the banter going back and forth between them, but the male lead, Andrew, did not really have a lot of personality, and I was not a fan of that, especially coming off of Take a Hint, Danny Brown, in which Zaf is so well characterized. There were tons of activities mentioned, and it was terribly festive, so honestly, a perfect book to read around Christmas time. As I mentioned, it's very much a Hallmark movie in a book form. I do plan to definitely try out some more of Christina Lauren in the future. This wasn't my favorite, but I will say I think I'm gonna go with like 3.5 stars. It was still enjoyable. Next up, the last book that I finished on New Year's Eve was The 12 Days of Christmas by Jenny Bayliss. This was the group read for the 12 Days of Bookmas Readathon. Anyway, this story is following a woman named Kate who lives in a small town in England. She signs up for an online dating service in which she is supposed to go on 12 separate dates leading up to Christmas. This was another enjoyable Christmas romance. It was pretty adorable, very festive, great atmosphere, and tons of cooking and baking. Honestly, this definitely made me hungry at multiple different points. However, I will say, unfortunately, the first half of this book was incredibly repetitive. It felt as though every single one of her dates was all the same, and many of them ended in the same way, where they were still in love with their ex. It also just kind of felt unfocused, where we would spend a lot of time just looking at Kate's everyday life. However, once we surpassed about the halfway point, the dates became more identifiable and more entertaining. While the main romance was sweet, I was really disappointed that they didn't actually have a lot of on-page time together. We saw plenty of build-up, but once they actually became a couple, it was probably in the last chapter. I do want to say this had some hilarious lines here and there. Most of these tabs are just lines that actively made me laugh out loud. In the end, a cute Christmas romance. Not the worst if you skip it, however. Okay, y'all, so that is it. That is officially all the books I read in December, the end of 2020. So weird, so weird. And let me know in the comments down below, what was your favorite read for December? Let's talk about it. As always, thank you so much for coming to my channel today. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. I come out with videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Bye.